Welcome back. We are going to turn our attention to one of the most important events for our industry, and that is IBIE. It's hard to believe that it's already been several months since the fun and success of IBIE 2025. And while many of us are still reflecting on the innovation and the energy from that show, planning for IBIE 2028 is well underway. To share an update on where we've been and, more importantly, where IBIE is headed, it's my pleasure to welcome Chairman of IBIE 2028, Alan Wright, to the stage.
Thank you, Emily, and aloha. Good morning, everyone. Everybody awake out there? I can't see anybody, but it's hard to believe that it's already been several months since we gathered in Las Vegas for IBIE 2025. When I think back on that week and reflect, it's the connections, it's the energy, it's the innovations, it's the conversations happening in every aisle, in every education session, and in every booth. It was another reminder that IBIE continues to be the place where the global baking industry comes together to learn, to connect, and to move our industry forward. But before I talk about where we're headed, I'd just like to take a moment to celebrate IBIE 2025. More specifically with this audience, BEMA at IBIE 2025. In addition to supporting the overall operations of IBIE, BEMA visited every member booth every day of the show, and that's something to celebrate. Take a look. Great walk down memory lane there. But now it's time to plan for 2028. IBIE continues to be the largest and most comprehensive baking industry event in the Western Hemisphere, bringing together thousands of baking professionals, hundreds of exhibiting companies, world-class education, dozens of competition, demonstrations, and innovation, and it's all under one roof. Every show gives us something to celebrate, but it also gives us something even more important, insight into how we can make the next show even better. And that's exactly what the committee has been doing. Shortly after IBIE 2025 concluded, the IBIE Executive Committee, the board, the staff, and our partners began an extensive strategic planning process. We've analyzed attendee data, we've gathered exhibitor feedback, we've focused on industry trends, we've identified emerging opportunities, to ensure that IBIE 2028 will continue to evolve alongside of our industry. The work has resulted in three clear priorities. First, we're focused on increasing attendance. Not simply growing attendance for the sake of growing numbers, but intentionally attracting the audience that create the greatest value for the exhibitors and the industry. That includes expanding participation among key wholesale bakery roles, and targeted retail audiences, international delegations, and adjacent food manufacturing segments. Second, we've committed to improving the attendee experience, our North Star, if you will. That means designing an event that is more intentional, more relevant, and more engaging, from education and activations to competitions to operations and the overall attendee journey. Every decision is being evaluated through one simple lens. Does this create greater value for the attendee? And third, we're enhancing our exhibitor return on investment and return on objectives. Exhibitors expect more than traffic. We want conversations. We want qualified buyers. We want stronger connections, and most importantly, we want measurable business outcomes. Our planning is focused on creating an environment that helps exhibitors achieve those goals while ensuring attendees leave with an exceptional experience. And perhaps what excites me most is that this is not just a vision, it's already in motion. Our strategic planning is complete. The roadmap has been approved, the work streams are underway, committees are actively developing initiatives that will shape IBIE 2028. So over the next year and a half, you will begin to see many of these ideas come to life as planning accelerates. And while it may seem like 2028 is a long way off, there's several important milestones much closer than you might think. In the coming months, we will continue refining programs, experiences, and exhibitor opportunities. Then before you know it, we'll reach one of the biggest milestones of the planning process, and that's space selection in January of 2027. That may sound early, but if you're exhibiting at IBIE 2028, now is the time to begin thinking strategically about your goals, your audience, and how you want to position your company for success. Because most successful exhibitors don't start planning 6 months before the show. They begin years in advance. And that leads perfectly into our next presentation. As IBIE continues to evolve, so do attendee expectations. Today's trade show success isn't measured only by booth traffic or badge scans. It's measured by the quality of the conversations that you have, the experiences that you create, and the business outcomes that you achieve. Our next speaker will challenge all of us to think differently about that. Kimberly Hardcastle from Freeman will share new research changing attendee expectations, practical strategies for maximizing both ROI and return on investment, and how you can begin applying now, well before exhibiting decisions are made for IBIE 2028. And before Kimberly comes up here, I just want to say Kimberly has been with our show and known of our show for 25 plus years, so she has a long history. And we're going to let her tell us, but we're really glad she's here on this island, not some other island today, in this hotel, presenting to us today. So she'll share a little bit on that. But please give a warm BEMA welcome to Kimberly Hardcastle.
Okay, and I have to start by saying, if I seem nervous, I am not afraid of public speaking, but I am deathly afraid of birds. And being in a room like with a bird is my biggest fear in life. I have bad dreams about this often. So Mike Goody just came over and whispered, just so you know. So if I scream, like, everybody stay calm. But all right, with that, I'm going to let my heart rate settle for a minute and just say thank you for having me here, for giving me an excuse to come to Hawaii and be among my friends. And as Ellen mentioned, I have been so lucky to be a part of IBIE and the BEMA community. I actually was with an agency called MDG. Some of you might be familiar with it. The primary focus of MDG is attendee acquisition and marketing for trade shows. And my very first one, I started working on the show in 2005 in preparation for the event in Orlando in 2007. So I ended up actually buying MDG from the founder in 2012, grew it from about 11 people to 130 people, sold it to Freeman, continued on for a few years after, and then a year ago, I transitioned into a role as chief strategist at Freeman. And as part of my responsibilities, I get to work very closely with our audience insight division. And what we do is we field research once a quarter across our vast portfolio of events. So this includes events like IBIE, restaurant, dairy, deli, bakery, but also CES, NAB, all kinds of events. And what we do is we talk to attendees and we find out how they're behaving at trade shows, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, what their expectations are. And we take this data, we aggregate it, and we report back to event organizers, to exhibitors, to ensure that we're all evolving and staying in sync with the changing needs of our audiences. So that's really what I'm going to talk about today. But I did want to start by just telling you all how much I love this industry, how much I love BEMA. And in fact, I love it so much that I nudged my son into an internship, which he's doing right now. He just graduated from college in May and is doing an internship at Aspire Bakeries, and he loves it. Is anybody here from Aspire? I can't see if anyone is. No. Well, hopefully I'll meet somebody later and get to tell him how much Sam loves working there. But one thing that was fun, listening to the panel beforehand, Sam, he was telling us that he got to do a tour of a bakery or a plant, and he said, I was really worried because you know how sometimes when you see how things are made, then you never want to like eat it again. And he said it was exactly the opposite. Like everything was so clean and so precise. It made me feel so proud of being a part of this company, what we were making. So it was cool. All right, so today's session is going to be very interactive. I'm going to give you time about halfway through to discuss some of the topics, some of the information with your table mates. So it just gives you a minute to kind of think, how will I operationalize this? What will I do? How does this apply to my exhibiting experience or my experience as a baker walking the trade show floor? So what I'd like to do to warm you guys up is have you go, if you're at a table with only a few people, or if you're in the back and you want to join a table, or just sit next to somebody you can do these exercises with, I want you to start by answering, oops, I was already on the slide, one of these two questions. What's one thing you want attendees to remember about your company after IBIE? Or what's one thing you've learned or noticed from walking a trade show floor that stuck with you? So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go around your table. If you don't know each other, introduce yourselves. If you do, jump right into answering these questions. All right, go. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up your conversations, and then we will get started with some of our content. All right, and here, oops, I went the wrong way. Here is our agenda for today, which I'm showing you because I want to stress that this is very much an interactive working session today. There is a lot of knowledge in this room. I want to make sure that you guys all have an opportunity to learn from each other as much as from the data that I'm going to share with you all. And so what we're going to do today, I'm going to start by sharing a first set of insights about how attendee expectations are changing and what that means for how exhibitors need to show up at IBIE. And please know that a lot of the things that I'm sort of referencing as old ways of doing things or what have you, it's very likely that they have worked for your organization in the past. But what I want you to do is keep an open mind, because the way that attendees are moving through events now is different. The way that people are making decisions has changed. So even though I might be saying something isn't relevant or whatever, it doesn't mean it never has been. It just means things are evolving. So the middle part of our time together, we're going to set that aside for table discussions. That's also a good time if you need to go out and take a quick break or whatever. Feel free to do that. After the break, I'm going to wrap it up with another set of insights, and then we'll close with a sort of report out. And I'm going to ask for maybe some volunteers at the end of the day to share one thing that you learned today, one thing that you found interesting, or one thing that you'll do differently as a result of today's session. And I do want to just stress that today's session, it's not about saying there's one right way to exhibit at IBIE. But the goal is really to give you a new lens for sort of looking at your trade show strategy so you can make more intentional decisions now that will pay off later. And with that, let's get into our first insight. And I've structured these around sort of what's out and what's now in. And I want to start with the first one. I'm going to be spending the most time here today, because I'm going to be referring back to this one quite often. So out is designing for yesterday's attendees, and in is designing for next generation event goers. And at Freeman, we refer to them as NGEGs, but the last panel made it very clear we have no space for more acronyms in this industry, so we'll just call them next gen event goers. But I don't only mean Gen Z as they're entering the workforce, but this next gen also incorporates millennials who increasingly are moving into positions of authority. They are shaping expectations. They have a lot more influence than they have in the past. So do we have any millennials in the room? All right, love to see it. And I just want to mention, those of you who are at the upper range, you guys are now officially middle-aged too. So congratulations to my millennials in the room. But let's put this into perspective a little bit by taking a look at where the workforce is headed, because IBIE 2028 is close enough that your planning decisions are likely starting now. I know Space Straw is in January. But far enough away that the audience is going to continue to shift before we get there. So by the end of this year, you can see on the slide, Gen Z is expected to represent a much larger portion of the workforce than boomers. So you've got Gen Z, 28%, boomers only 8%. And millennials, those of you in the room, we used to think you guys were like the next big thing, the big up-and-comers. But as I said, you are here. You are in positions of authority. You're making decisions. You're very much in leadership roles. So the center of gravity is starting to shift already. And by the end of 2030, that shift becomes even more pronounced. So millennials and Gen Z together will make up 75% of the workforce by 2030. All of the boomers will be of retirement age, whether they have retired or not, we don't know, but they will be able to. And again, I know IBIE 2028 sits sort of in the middle of this shift, but it's important to start thinking about these things. And the idea, like I'm not saying you need to design only for young people, but we're planning for how attendee expectations are changing. And I think it's just important to understand the workforce demographics that are going to be a reality for you. And for me, it's important to understand why expectations are changing. And I thought this snapshot was really helpful. And it's basically taking a look at the factors that influenced each generation as they began their careers. So if you think about baby boomers, they entered the workforce during a period of time that really rewarded stability and hierarchy and institutional loyalty. Gen X came along during restructuring, increasing skepticism. Millennials entered during a period of economic instability and rapid digital transformation. And then think about Gen Z. So they entered during a pandemic, political polarization that we really haven't seen to this degree before, economic uncertainty, constant connectivity, and the rise of AI. So it's huge. And I think oftentimes what happens is when younger generations show up to the workforce with different expectations, there's this tendency for the generation or generations above them to say, you know, they're entitled, they don't work hard enough, they expect promotions too quickly, yada, yada, yada. But a lot of times, the reason why generations show up to the workforce in the ways that they do, it's really a reaction of, you know, a logical response of the things that are happening in the world around them. So I do want to mention one other thing that I find really interesting about our Next Gen event goers and in relation to technology. So even though they are obviously very comfortable with technology, the rise of tech has made Generation Z feel less connected and more isolated from others at their company and within their industry than ever before. So yes, they do research online. We're going to talk about that today. They may discover companies through search, through social, through video, through AI. But does that mean they want a digital-only experience? It absolutely doesn't. And in fact, the opposite is true. So Freeman's research shows that Gen Z sees in-person events as a way to build social and interpersonal skills, strengthen professional confidence, stay ahead of what's happening in their industry, and support their career development. So the takeaway is not that technology is going to make trade shows less relevant. The takeaway is that they may become even more important, but it's important for those of us that are organizing the events or showing up to the events as exhibitors that we're doing so in a way that is relevant to how they learn, how they connect, and how they want to build trust. And that's a lot of what we're going to discuss today, especially the issue of trust. So before we do that, I wanted to show a quick video to pay homage to my millennials. And I don't know if there's any Gen Zers in the room, but for the rest of you, you can see if you can relate.
Hey, we need to discuss your quarterly performance metrics.
What?
He said, bestie, he wants to tell you how you've been slaying at work.
Oh, bet. That's actually fire. My numbers have been giving main character energy. All facts, no printer.
She's excited and confident. Her performance has been excellent. She's being honest with you.
I need you to work harder and focus on the synergistic optimization of your deliverables.
He's saying bet. He wants you to lock in and make your work hit different.
Say less. I'm about to be so locked in, it's not even funny.
She understands exactly what you're saying, and she'll focus and be intense about her work.
Oh, that's great.
See? Gen Zs and millennials can work together.
All right, and before we bring the lights back up, sorry, any Gen Xers in the room? All right, we're obviously the best generation, right? So I wanted to make sure you guys didn't feel left out. So I brought this little friend that I think is an excellent representation of our generation.
I'm Gen X, the sarcastic shadow in the corner cubicle who knows how to fix every damn thing. You know, the copier, the Wi-Fi, your attitude, maybe my own trauma. But all without a TED Talk or support group. I've been working since before I had peach fuzz, you know, paper routes in the freezing cold, bagging groceries for $3 an hour while being told to smile more by people who smell like Virginia Slims and regret. I didn't grow up being heard because nobody gave a damn if I was tired, sad, or overwhelmed. You think I ever got asked how I felt about a damn thing? No, I was told to shut up and get it done and keep moving. So I did. I still do. I let my work speak for itself. I'm the one picking up the slack when you're too busy making social media posts or stress eating in the damn bathroom again. I get the job done, and yeah, I'll let you know about it with a side of sarcasm and a sneer. I don't quit, I don't tap out, and for some godforsaken reason, I don't even want to retire yet. Maybe it's because sitting still feels like surrender, or maybe because I know the second I stop moving, my joints are gonna frickin' seize up like a rusty lawnmower in the winter. I'm not rough around the edges because I am the edges, sharp, unbothered, and held together by caffeine, duct tape, and a deep-seated fear of asking for help because why the hell do I need you? So before you side-eye me before being too intense or not a team player, just know I've been carrying teams on my back since before you were born, little one. And if I'm a little gruff, it's not because I'm mean, it's because I've been through some shit and I'm still standing. Now get out of my damn way. I got work to do.
Who else relates like a little too closely to that guy in their room? So I showed this at the IBIE committee meeting, and Jason, I'm totally spacing on his last name, from Flowers Foods, Fry, stood up and gave him a standing ovation. Like, clearly this guy resonated with him. So like I said, we're going to talk about generational differences and how those show up in some of these attendee expectations. So I wanted to spend a little more time there setting the stage. So that was our first shift. The next shift builds on what we just discussed. So if attendees are changing, if they're doing more research online before they arrive, then what this means for exhibitors is that the booth conversation has to change. And out is here's what we do, and in is why what we do is right for you. Here's what I mean by that. So historically, the exhibit floor was where discovery began. So attendees would walk up and down the aisles. If they saw something interesting, they would stop, they would talk to an exhibitor, ask questions, that sort of thing. And that does still happen. IBIE will always be a place for discovery, but increasingly, some of that discovery is happening before attendees get to the show floor. So like I said, they're researching online, they're watching videos, they're talking to peers, they're comparing options, and they might be arriving at IBIE with a short list already forming. So the show floor is still incredibly important as part of the buying process, but it might just be important at a different stage for different reasons, because it's now increasingly where buyers are comparing and validating and building confidence. So when somebody comes to your booth now, they might not only be asking, what do you do? But they might be asking, is it right for me? Is it right for my company? Is this right for my customers? Is this right for my budget, for my timeline? Is this right for the problem that I'm solving? And that is a very different conversation than a basic product introduction. And it requires that the attendee has a different booth experience and speak to a different booth team, one that's prepared to meet buyers where they are. And we're going to go into depth on that momentarily. But it is why when you're thinking about your IBIE booth that you want to think beyond visibility. The booth now gives you an opportunity to influence buyers when they're actively comparing, validating, and deciding. And that's a really powerful moment, because at that point, the attendee is not just casually browsing, walking up and down aisles. They're trying to figure out who to trust, what's worth pursuing, and what products or solutions belong in their consideration set. And that means for you guys that as you're starting to think about and plan for IBIE, that the questions that you want to discuss with your team are a little bit different. You want to ask yourselves, who are we trying to influence? What is it likely that they will already know about us before they arrive on site? What questions are they likely to ask us? What would help them understand if our solution is the right fit? And what do we need beyond the booth to move them from interest to confident? And those questions are going to show up in different ways throughout the rest of the presentation. But the point here is very simple. If attendees are arriving at the show more informed, then your job is to not just explain, but to help them decide. So I want to pause. I don't know if we have the mic ready, but is anybody seeing this? Like, are you guys seeing your buyers showing up more informed? Do you think we're still at the early part of this trend? Is this something that, as you exhibit at other shows, you're thinking about? Anybody have any thoughts on this? Or the generational videos that we just showed? Anything? And I can't see anything, so. All right. Oh, we have a couple over here.
Thank you, Kim. This is great, by the way, as we prepare for this next IBIE cycle. But one of the things I want to ask you is, looking at these slides, we question ourselves all the time. Do we want to bring more equipment onto the booth? Or do we want to talk more about the brand and where that's going? Or do we want to be, that hospitality booth? And I think, 2 years out, it's going to happen quickly. But as we make those big decisions internally, like, where do you see the focuses for this new group that's, getting a bigger say in the way these decisions are made? Which one of those categories are they looking at when they show up?
So that's an awesome question, and I'm going to be going into that in depth. But I do want to say one thing. We talked about the rise of AI. I think you've had sessions as part of BEMA talking about AI. What generation do you instinctively think uses AI the most? Z. You're right. It's Gen Z. Which generation do you think trusts AI the least? Gen Z. Same generation. So they use it, and they also don't trust it. They're not the ones that ever, sent their money away to the Nigerian prince or whatever. Like, those were our parents. So trust is an issue. There's so much AI, like especially AI-generated video that's out there. People don't know what to trust anymore. So coming to trade shows where they can speak to experts and get their hands on products, that's what's becoming increasingly important. There might be some exceptions to that depending on what your objectives are, but it's engineering opportunities for your attendees to build trust. That's what I would think about as you're planning your strategy. So good question. Did you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, so my question's more around, in the past, a trade show has kind of been a place to show your latest and greatest, and you almost hold it tight to the chest until the show comes up to kind of build that hype, that like anticipation. But with this shift, how do you view the balance of putting out just enough to bring the people in without putting all your cards on the table initially?
Right, that's a really good question. And I think it sort of depends on what your strategy is. But it might be that there's things that are done online to generate interest, to tease, that sort of thing, and then fully launch at IBIE, make appointments where they can come see things in your booth, get more information. So I don't know that there's one right answer or one right way, but I think about, or I would recommend thinking about the buyer journey and what role you want IBIE to play in that journey. And maybe it isn't awareness, like maybe that's not where they learn about it for the first time, but where they move from awareness to consideration and what you need to do in the booth to facilitate that journey. Yeah.
To your question or comment about seeing the shift of people researching more ahead of time and how we're seeing that. And I would say it's been interesting over the last 5 years or so how much more detailed the exhibitor portals have become, and the information that we are able to put on there about us as a company, what we're exhibiting, who our contacts are, our literature, our website, all those different things. And so I think that that probably was on the leading edge of that trend. And we've even seen trade shows then where we are connected before the trade show. And people will submit like, I want to have a meeting with you, and they do it through the exhibitor portal. So definitely seeing that shift to other trade shows as well. And I think to this point, it's very important to have that capability where they can connect with us even before the show.
Love that, yeah.
Yeah.
Great advice, great observation. And for those of you, we have one comment here. While we get a mic over, I was gonna say too, for those of you who are in the room who are millennials, what's the first thing that you do before you go to a restaurant for the first time or have any new experience for the first time? Reviews and research it online. Yeah, exactly. So it's showing up everywhere as we start to see more of the new generation, next-gen event goers at events. Yes.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, Wendy, because what I was going to speak to was this whole shortlist effort that people are able to have as they think about going to the expo and what they're going to look for. It's almost to a disadvantage, because if I go there and I think I know everyone who's exhibiting and I've made my short list, who am I going to skip to make sure that I see everyone, and what opportunities are going to be missed by other people exhibiting because they didn't make it onto the short list? So with these apps that we have access to, it is important to fill out that profile, because if there's not enough information, you're not making it onto that short list.
100%. That's a really good point. All right, and we're going to talk about this more today, but let's move on to our next shift. And I think this really speaks to what you guys are saying in terms of how do we get discovered. And this is about preparation. So if attendees are doing more research before they arrive, if they're making that short list, then it's important that we're not simply showing up, but we are showing up prepared. And I do mean this in both directions. So prepared before the show so that we are discoverable, so that attendees know we'll be there, and also prepared for after the show so that the conversations that you start on site don't lose momentum as you get back to the office and then sort of try to figure out your follow-up plan. And again, I know that IBIE might still feel far away, but the point of planning now is that it's so much easier to do when you have time to be strategic and think about these things versus when you're in the final countdown. So this is actually data from Exhibitor Magazine, and it shows how valuable pre-show marketing can be. So exhibitors who engage in pre-show marketing report stronger booth traffic, increased brand awareness, improved lead quality, and better interactions on site. And this all makes perfect sense, right? Because if attendees are planning in advance, then your job is to get on their radar, is to get on their short list before they get on the plane. And yet, 80% of exhibitors do little or no targeted pre-show marketing. This is not specific to IBIE, this is across the industry. So I think IBIE statistics are a little bit better than that. But the other statistic that I find crazy is that 64% of trade show leads are never followed up on. So if you think about it, that is your opportunity. If attendees are making plans before they arrive, and most exhibitors are not doing pre-show marketing, most exhibitors aren't doing anything to influence those plans, there's your opportunity to stand out. And moreover, if your competitors are not following up with their leads, there's even more room for you to close deals as well. So if you revisit this slide from earlier, the buyer journey, whether an attendee discovers you on the trade show floor or beforehand or whatever, the journey does not begin at IBIE. Before the show, you do have to be discoverable. Attendees need to know that you're there. They need to also understand why you matter, why they should put you on their short list. During the show, you need to create an interaction that helps them move forward. And after the show, you need a follow-up plan to keep the momentum going. Because a successful trade show plan is not just about the days of the show. It's about the full journey before, during, and after. Okay, So the last shift was about attendees arriving more informed. They might already know the basics about your booth. They might have a short list. They might be coming with specific questions. So the booth experience that you offer has to do more than just introducing your product or solution. It has to help attendees evaluate. And this is where the research that we've done at Freeman is really, really clear. Attendees want to get hands-on with product. So out is standing and just scanning badges, and in is touching and trying. And badge scans do matter. I know they matter to a lot of you. But if the experience an attendee has is just a quick scan and a promise to follow up, then you're missing what makes a live environment really valuable, because attendees want to be there to see it and touch it and try it and watch it work and understand how it might apply to their own business. Here's the data. In Freeman's research, attendees were asked, what is the little question up there, what's most likely to negatively impact your ability to evaluate products and services at a business event? The top answer was limited hands-on exposure to products and services. And I think this matters a lot for IBIE, because so much of this industry needs to be experienced in context. So whether you have equipment or ingredients or technology, solutions, processes, production lines, whatever, I think it's one thing to read about a solution online, but it's another thing to be able to see the piece of equipment running, to see it in action and be able to ask questions and understand how it might fit into a line. And you'll also see a lack of subject matter experts on this list, which we're going to talk about next. But the key point with this trend is that just passive information isn't enough. And I think most exhibitors at IBIE do a really good job with this as well. But those who don't, it has real consequences, because among attendees who did not receive hands-on experiences, 42% said they were actually more likely to prioritize other vendors. So the risk isn't just that somebody's going to walk past your booth. The risk is that they're going to walk past it into your competitor's booth and gain more confidence with what they're offering. And I think this is especially relevant for next generation attendees, because they are less likely to be influenced by legacy or loyalty and more by experience, relevance, and choice. So the good news is that our data shows when attendees do have hands-on experience, 98% says it's easier to advocate for the purchase of a product or service. 95% said it's easier to determine whether the product or service is going to be a good fit. And 93% say it helps them become more aware of or better evaluate an offering. So essentially, our attendees are telling us how to help them move forward. Let me experience it, let me ask questions in the booth, and let me picture it in my own business. So the planning question is simple. What do attendees need to experience in our booths at IBIE to believe us, remember us, and advocate for us? This is just a quick summary of how to turn this advice into action. So incorporate immersive activations in your booth. So think about product trials, live demonstrations, simulations, interactive tech. But the key is you're not just telling them what you do, you're letting them experience it. If you don't know how to do this, if it's not obvious, partner with experts who can help you bring that vision to life. So it might be, I don't know, your agency or a general services contractor, your internal product team. But they should be able to help you find answers that fit within your budget and your space and your timeline and that sort of thing. And then the other thing is just making sure that you're training your staff who will be in the booth, because the best booth staff aren't just there to pitch, they're there to facilitate. And I'm going to elaborate on this in our next insight. But What would you guys, just to pause here for a second, what kinds of things do you think IBIE attendees, like the main buyers that are walking the trade show floor, like what are the things they need to see in action to believe? And do you think in general that IBIE were doing a good job with this? Any thoughts on this one? Emily, you can just call on people too. Put them on the spot. Like, they would love that. You're my favorite attendee here. I love when people participate. Thank you. Except Wes got rid of the birds, so you're actually my true hero, Wes. Yes.
Well, anyone in this room that knows me knows I always have an opinion, so
love
happy
it
to share it. I missed a portion of it because you gave me so many thoughts, I had to write them down right away. But if I had to think about what decision makers see or want to see as soon as they're walking on the booth, I would say people who are genuine, people who are actually listening instead of just seeing you as an obligation or an opportunity. Something that we at Rademacher are very proud of is that we don't just provide equipment, we provide solutions.
Love it.
Even if our equipment isn't the solution, we know a way to help you, even if it's not us that's helping you. And I think when we facilitate conversations on behalf of our customers instead of on behalf of our equipment, that's what speaks to decision makers and makes them want to stick around on our booth.
Awesome. Yeah, having people that are genuine there. I do think you guys do a good job at this. It's a lot of tech shows that I see where you see the people standing behind the booth that are like, here's some socks or hot sauce or whatever tchotchke they're giving out. Let me scan your badge and I'll follow up with you later. They don't have subject matter experts in the booth, and the relationship feels very transactional, and it feels like things they could have done online. So just think about this, whatever it means to your company, like how do we have experiences for our attendees that allow them to really get their hands on and build trust. And I'm going to do one more insight, and then I'm going to pause and have you guys work at your tables again. So the next one, this is also grounded in Freeman research, and it does have to do with who you put in your booth. So we talked about the fact that attendees are doing more research before they arrive. They may already know the basics. They may have a short list. They may have specific questions about whether a product or ingredient or technology or solution is right for their business. So when they come to an event like IBIE, they are looking for something that they can't get from a website or a brochure or whatever. They want access to the people who really know the product and the process and the science and the equipment and the application. So out is generic booth talent, and in are subject matter experts. And I do want to be clear about one thing. This is not about removing salespeople from the booth. Salespeople absolutely matter. They create energy, they are welcoming, they start conversations, they can qualify interest, they can help sort of move an attendee, a buyer, through the experience. But attendees overwhelmingly want the people that can answer deeper questions. And our research shows that 84% of attendees say connecting with subject matter experts at a trade show is extremely or very important to their event experience. And that's a pretty big number, 84%. And it reinforces that how you staff your booth at IBIE should be a very strategic decision. Because if your booth is only staffed for greeting and scanning and general product introductions, then you might not be prepared for that attendee who has shown up doing their homework and wants to sort of pressure test what they already know. So if you think about your booth more like a journey, I think that it sort of helps solidify it for me, where different people can play different roles. So you might have those like outgoing salespeople that are sort of at the perimeter of the booth, bringing people in to maybe talk to the subject matter experts who can kind of qualify it. Maybe you do, also have meeting rooms for executive level conversations with attendees who are making purchasing decisions on site. But however you staff your booth, you want to align it to your objectives and be strategic about it. And this next data point shows why this really matters. When attendees were asked what would improve their interactions with exhibitors, more than half said speaking with subject matter experts. But when we asked exhibitors, only 26% identified that as one of the most important ways to improve engagement at trade shows. And that's a pretty meaningful disconnect. So I think exhibitors oftentimes are super focused on scanning badges and sending follow-up emails, which aren't wrong. Like, there is probably a place for that within your booth. You do need a way to like capture general interest and continue the conversation. But if your booth experience itself, it feels too transactional, then it's likely attendees really aren't getting what they came for. And a badge scan is not a conversation. A follow-up email is not access to expertise. And if your booth is just functioning sort of like a static website, then you're not taking advantage of the full event environment. So again, just to quickly sort of wrap this trend up and how to operationalize it, blend charisma and credibility. So as I mentioned, you want people that can draw people in and create energy, but then also your subject matter experts that can kind of answer the next level question. Second, make subject matter expertise very intentional and visible. So don't just like tuck them away in a corner. Think about ways for them to interact, like where you can feature them a little bit more clearly. So maybe you are doing demos and they're there, or you have office hours with them, or ask the expert moments, scheduled consultations, or just like internal hands-off where a salesperson can hand off an attendee to a subject matter expert to answer deeper questions. I was actually at an event with a gentleman from Zoom recently, and he was talking about how they will bring in, like, their subject matter experts can't always travel to all their shows, so they do bring them in, or they have access to them digitally. So if somebody asks a question, they can still get it answered right then and there with a subject matter expert through Zoom. I don't think it's ideal, but if you can't have them there in person, there's other ways to make sure you have access to them. But whatever you're doing, pressure test the whole team with purpose. So make sure everybody understands why you're there, who you're trying to reach, and what question attendees are likely to ask of them, and what's exhibiting success looks like. All right, so I have 3 more insights to share, but before I do that, I want to break so you guys can have a table discussion, and I'd like for you to stick with the out and in framework. So you can go around your table, you can answer these questions however you'd like within the context of your own company. Like if there's something that you're doing that feels out, you can answer it that way. Something that you've seen done at other trade shows, what have you. I'll let you guys read these. I'll give you about 15 minutes, or we'll see how we're doing, 10, 15 minutes to talk among your group about what we just discussed. Based on that, 1 exhibitor behavior habit or assumption that feels out, 1 behavior strategy or experience that feels in, 1 practical change exhibitors could make before IBIE to create better conversations with attendees. So go. Okay, now I'd love to hear what the discussions at your tables were. I did have a few volunteers who I, of course, voluntold to share what they came up with. So let's hear from a few of you. What did you discuss? We'll start with this table in the back. Troy.
Well, one of the things was, I'm Troy Henry with the Henry Group. One of the things was about customers, especially when they come up, we have a tendency to want to go directly into this is what we're doing, this is what we can do for you, instead of seeking out to say, what are your problems, what are your needs, what are you looking for? And as you dig into a customer, or let them just tell you, yeah, we're here looking for this or that, because we may be trying to sell them a piece of equipment and they may be looking for services. They may be looking for something entirely different, or have problems that it may be that you can't solve. But you have an opportunity to build a relationship or trust with that customer by saying, you know what, okay, if you're looking for this solution, you need to go over and see this customer or that customer. And we've done that many times, but I think seeking to understand them and help solve their issues.
Love it.
That's one
Thank
of the
you.
things, but-
All right, and we have a little focus group here too. Like I'm telling you across our portfolio, here's what attendees want, but we have a couple of bakers at this table, so I shouldn't ask you like a question I don't know the answer to, but tell me, like, am I full of crap? Or like, is this correct? Like, is what I'm saying, you want to see equipment, you want subject matter experts? Like, give us your thought.
Why me? That's interesting because there's no one straight answer to to this thing. And we were discussing here in the table what kind of attracts us when we will go and walk IBIE or IBA or whatever. So kind of in recent times, we tend to go focused on what we're needing, then we need to, where's a supplier that can fulfill that need, right? But if we go that route, then we are missing like a bunch of other opportunities that might be, out there. So, and also the amount of people that we go from Bimbo into the shows, I'm trying to give you guys the back. The amount of people has been also reduced, and again, by representations of the different organizations going to look for what that is needed. So kind of my personal view is try to go with the incumbents at certain level, not necessarily brand new, because you need to work in another set of understanding who is that other supplier, but I'm open to hear and listen to new opportunities besides incumbents.
Yeah. Well, ideally, the attendees are coming with a plan and open to a little bit of serendipity, too, like to discover new things. Do we have another one, Emily?
I think we do.
Okay.
Well, we went back and forth on a few things, just as what's working, what's not working, and it really come down to time management and being able of who's on the booth, having the right resource, whether it be the subject matter expert or whatever it may be. But one thing was the meetings. So on both sides, on the customer's side and on our side, on the OEM side, both are looking for justification to be there, that we're having quality meetings, that we're having quality discussions, moving things forward. But in turn, what that does, you have both that are setting up meetings that's taking up time, whether it be closed off and being able to have. So I think that's one that just to kind of rethink about how those meetings go, what the duration of those meetings, what the expectations, and what could be done before or after. I think that's a struggle, and it really comes down to time management and the right resources.
Great point, time management, absolutely. All right, should I move on? Let's move on to our last set of insights. So, before the break, we talked about how exhibitors can create more meaningful interactions through hands-on experiences and better preparation and by providing access to subject matter experts. But now I want to shift from the interaction to the actual booth, to the environment itself. So in other words, what your booth looks like, what it feels like, what it communicates before anybody on your team ever says a word to the buyers. And at a show like IBIE, where attendees have a lot to see, it is a really big show. They have a lot to compare, and they have a limited amount of time to get through everything. So the goal cannot just be showing up and blending in. So out is blending in, and in is breaking through. And when I say breakthrough, I don't just mean showing up with the flashiest booth for the sake of being flashy, but I mean being intentional so that the right attendees, they notice you, they understand what you do, and they have a reason to engage. And again, the good news, IBIE 2028 is still far enough out that you have time to make decisions about these things now. So 3 steps in relation to the environment. The first step is making sure that you capture the attention of your buyers. And I know that sounds like really obvious, but it's not always easy because attendees are moving quickly. They are scanning the floor. They're deciding in seconds whether something is worth stopping for if it's not already on their short list. So your booth has to give them a reason to pause. And that might come through a visually striking layout. It might be like an unexpected structure in your booth, a working piece of equipment, movement, lighting, anything that just sort of naturally draws people in and gets them to stop. And it's not all about booth size either. I want to make that clear. Even small spaces, if they're designed with intention, they can also break through the noise. But the question is to ask yourself is, when somebody walks past your booth, what will make them want to stop? Once you have their attention, the next question is, what gives people a reason to talk? And it could be a live demonstration, it could be a product reveal, a clever use of equipment, a surprising visual, a hands-on experience, as we discussed earlier. But something that makes somebody say, like, hey, did you see what they're doing over in like X booth? You want to make sure that you're creating buzz that relates to your company and your business. You don't just want attention for attention's sake. You want attention that reinforces what you want to be known for. So as you're thinking ahead to IBIE, ask not just what would get people to notice us, what would get our booth to stand out, but what gets people to notice us for the right reasons. And that's where booth design really becomes strategic. And then once people are near your space, the question becomes, what are you actually saying? And I do think this is probably where a lot of booths kind of fall short. They may look good, but then the message is too generic, or it's too hard to read, or too hard to like understand quickly. And in that regard, there's a few things that matter. So when you think about your messaging, keep it short. Attendees should be able to understand the main idea in just a few seconds. Make the most important part of your message the most visible part of your message. So think about what people can see over the crowd, or from the end of the aisle, or from a distance, or whatever. And then the third thing, and I think this is a thing that we don't often think about, is encourage action. So your messaging should not just describe what you do, but it should actually prompt the buyer to do something. So to watch a demo, or to ask a question, or compare a solution, or scan for more information, or step into a conversation, or whatever. So when you think about your physical booth and you think about signage, the goal is movement, getting the buyers to move through the booth journey. I will, this is a little bit of an aside, but I do want to say that for many attendees, and especially next-gen event goers, sustainability and responsible practices and values-based decision-making are part of how they are evaluating companies. And I think this is one of the most drastic changes from earlier generations to our next-gen event goers. And I am not saying that every booth needs to have a new, a total sustainability platform before IBIE comes about. But it does mean there might be practical choices you can make, like, can you reduce waste? Can you rethink what your giveaways are? I think that's one of the things that we're seeing across all of our shows, is that the little styrofoam tchotchkes or whatever, they're not super popular. A lot of giveaways now are things that are consumed or are somehow eco-friendly. Can you use recyclable materials or reusable materials? Can you repurpose assets? Anything that you can do to make your sustainability a little bit more visible, but also in a way that feels authentic and not just performative, will resonate with the next-gen event goers. So to bring this together, use bold visuals and clear messaging to attract attendees to your booth. Design for buzz, but make sure that the buzz is tied to purpose. And where you can, incorporate sustainable materials or reusable assets in ways that support your brand story. All right. We talked about the importance of designing a booth that stands out, because the booth still matters. Your booth is still going to be your home base at IBIE. It's where your brand lives. It's where your products are showcased, where your staff's going to be hanging out, where most of the conversations that really matter happen. But this shift is actually about recognizing that your booth might not be your entire exhibiting strategy at IBIE. So out is booth-only thinking, and in is total event presence. So think about how your brand can show up across the IBIE experience in ways that support your goals and create interactions and help attendees remember you. Because sometimes I think those important conversations happen after a demo or during an education session or in a hallway conversation or over coffee or what have you. So to think beyond the booth, remember at IBIE, there are so many ways that attendees come to learn and discover and evaluate what matters in the industry. So they do walk the show floor, obviously, but they also attend demos, they participate in education, and they notice when they're there which brands are showing up in helpful, relevant ways. So the opportunity is to create more than just a surface level engagement. You could lean into maybe like lending out your equipment for a demo stage as an example, or sponsoring some sort of educational offering. It might mean creating a hospitality moment, a customer conversation, a networking opportunity, just another touch point where your brand can be experienced in a different context. And I'm not saying you guys should try to be everywhere, but identify the moments that make sense for your audience and your objectives. Because the more ways that attendees can experience and see your brand at IBIE, not just your logo, but they can experience your expertise and your people and your point of view, the better. And this was something, I mentioned the guy from Zoom I heard. He talked a lot about when they exhibit, how they try to think about the margins and using the margins intentionally. And I think that at events, sometimes the most important conversations do happen outside of a booth. They happen between sessions, and they happen after demos and over coffee and in hallways and all the things. And that is where trust often gets built. So, you know, I think you hear people saying, have you talked to this company, or did you see that demo, or whatever? So the question for you guys is, how do you plan for those moments instead of just leaving them entirely to chance? And maybe that means just making sure you have some of the right people that are available after a demo, or having meetings planned with your customers, having a sponsorship opportunity, that sort of thing. But think about the margins. And then the final shift is how we define success. And I do think for a long time at IBIE, we've always talked about success in relation to badge scans and total attendance numbers. And those things do matter, like I'm not downplaying them. But remember how we talked about at the beginning, how attendees are now coming at a different stage of the buying journey. The awareness is already there. I think if we're only measuring lead counts or badge scans as part of our success, we're probably doing it wrong. So doing it right starts with setting very clear goals before the show, maybe even before choosing your space in January. Are you trying to raise brand awareness, or launch something new, or generate pipeline, or educate current customers, or defend your key accounts, make connections? Like, all of those things are valid goals for IBIE, but they do require different strategies and different ways of measuring success. So once your goal is clear, then align your actions to it. So, and this kind of goes back to a question I had earlier, like how should we be, you know, should we have hospitality rooms or bring equipment or whatever? If awareness is your goal, you may need visibility beyond the booth. If education is, you might need demos, those SMEs. If relationship building is the goal, you may need private meeting space. If lead gen is the goal, have a clear process for capturing leads. But the point is that different objectives should lead to different choices. So start with a clear objective, design with that purpose in mind, choose tactics that support the goal, and measure what actually matters. and I have 30 seconds left. And so I am going to end with a quick recap. I was going to ask for a report out, but what I would like for you to do is to take this information back to your team and talk to them about one thing you would do differently, one thing you learned, one thing you found interesting as a result of today's conversation. And in closing, I want to thank Emily and Alan for having me here and for allowing me to present this information while you still have plenty of time to make smart strategic decisions about your IBIE strategy. So good luck and enjoy the rest of your time.